Connoisseurs will have noticed during the recent developer direct that the newest Fable game is missing something that many consider vital. A certain someone that we all remember fondly from the heyday of this quintessentially British action RPG.
For Christ's sake.
No, not him. I'm talking about the dog, and yes, in case you missed it, it's confirmed the next Fable will not have a canine companion. They've long taken that idea behind the barn and blown it away like an elderly border collie that won't stop piddling on the carpet. It was an open secret for years that Playground Games, the Forza Horizon people, had been handed the daunting task of reviving Fable, the beloved RPG series, an incongruous choice that seemed about as unhinged as a Peter Molyneux press junket when we all first heard about it.
We've all asked ourselves this question, well, if I was in control, I would change this.
So let me just get this right, they've given Fable, the doddery old fantasy game about thatched roofs and incontinence, to the guys who make games about flinging the arse of a Pagani Zonda around the Riviera. The lads who took Edinburgh, the stuffy, mould-ridden capital of the second oldest country in Europe, and turned it into Lollapalooza for car pricks. I mean, yeah, that's about the size of it. Kiss FM Roadshow ass game, man. As an aside, I think for most of us, our first instinct was to think, Playground, yeah, they make open world games, but they don't make fantasy open world games, and that's different. But is it? It's cutting about in a McLaren F1, like your Jay Leno, like it's just one of your many hundreds of amazing vehicles. I mean, obviously that's no fantasy if you're Jay Leno, but Jay Leno probably daydreams about being able to sneak out in a piece of car without being molested, you know? What's Jay Leno got that I've not got, apart from everything? I suppose my point is that Playground are the masters of wish fulfillment. What better custodian is there for the franchise that started life as a little design document entitled Wish World? I like that, you know, there's a poetry to that, there's a symmetry to it.
We've built a pedigree for beautiful, immersive, open-world experiences. Yes, they've typically involved sports cars.
You know, at the point in last week's showcase where your man cracked a joke about that very incongruity, I knew we were in safe hands. For what is the most essential qualification to make a Fable game than the painful self-awareness about the tenability of your situation, the kind that the poor that Lionhead must have had in abundance while toiling under the games industry's most notorious bullshit artist, who would infamously make up game features in interviews that his team wouldn't be aware of until they read about them on Eurogamer or IGN. Other websites are available.
So I probably wouldn't want to talk about that. We've got a real issue with that.
The point of this isn't to stick the boot into Peter Molyneux, a man who's had many boots stuck into him, but to highlight his and Lionhead's legacy of chaos, of workplace toxicity and half-finished games with long lists of unrealised features, in contrast to Playground's track record of reliably delivering a series of open-world games with a clear vision and identity born of smart decision-making and a fairly decent working culture that means its team aren't likely to find themselves crunching to implement daft, last-minute ideas conjured out of thin air by an errant hype man.
I shouldn't hype the game, I shouldn't talk about the game until it's finished.
Fable 2's beloved, adored dog might be the most quintessentially Molyneux feature of them all, arguably his crowning achievement in a long career of bold and brilliant pieces of game design, a feature that was infamously detested by his team during development, who begged him to cut the feature on the grounds that it was an annoying, yappy little that they could barely get to work reliably.
We give you no control over the dog. Just think about that a second. No control over the dog.
But as the story goes, Molyneux insisted, which was a good decision on his part, because that core relationship between the player and the Fable 2 dog is the defining feature of the whole game. In fact, it's one of the defining features of the entire saga. It ensured Fable 2's status as a modern classic and a brilliant, definitive sequel. And definitive is the word. There'll no doubt be comments underneath this very video where people talk about the dog as if it is a defining feature of the entire Fable saga. And let's remember, it wasn't in the first game. It's something that came along for the sequel, but it has become so synonymous with the entire thing. It's like how everyone's favourite Star Trek show is The Next Generation. I think Fable 2 is the one that most people have a soft spot for, and that's despite its jankiness, its horrifically laggy interface, and the rushed second half where you can almost feel entire stretches of planned content being ripped out of the thing in real time as the game hurtles toward a conclusion where the player is forced to choose between 3 fixed endings, which have little to do with any of the choices you might have made during the rest of the game, committing the great sin of Mass Effect 3 long before that game was in active development.
Do you consider that a victory? You're merely delaying the inevitable.
Except it's a little unfair, because while the end of the game is rushed, it does confront the player with an iconic moral quandary and dares us to stay in character. A role-playing game that plays chicken with you and asks, exactly how committed are you to the bit here? 2 of the 3 optional endings reflect the binary morality at the heart of Fable, the system where you choose to be a good or bad person through your actions, and that reputation becomes etched into your character cosmetically. To put it really simplistically, if you're really good, you end up with a halo. If you're really bad, you eventually get horns. If you care about Fable 2 spoilers, by the way, stop watching now.
Make a wish, but choose wisely, for it will affect all of Albion.
So there's a good ending where you can resurrect almost everyone killed by the game's villain at the cost of your own loved ones, including the dog staying dead. And there's an evil ending where you just get given more money than it's possible to spend in the game and everyone dies.
More gold than you can imagine, to spend on whatever pleases you.
And there's a third option where you can choose to save your loved ones, including the dog, but everyone else in the world stays dead, so you get to keep your family intact at the expense of leaving countless other ones shattered, sacrificing the happiness of the entire world, leaving it with a scar of generational trauma for decades to come, just so you can continue playing fetch with a slobbering, stinky animal that rolls around in dirt. And most players, myself included, chose to save the dog. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. Look man, if somebody said to me either your cat dies or we nuke Hartlepool, Darlington's about to get a lot of new beachfront property. I'm sorry, it's a small price to pay. Look at our little folded arms. And also, it's only Hartlepool. What are we losing here? It is, in contrast to Mass Effect 3, one of the greatest and most memorable video game endings of all time because of how stark the options are. Asking people to give up the dog in order to achieve the best and most heroic outcome is a delicious dilemma, not just because of the bond you genuinely feel with your canine companion by that point in the game, but because the dog is essential to the core gameplay, and you put yourself at a real disadvantage in the end game if you get rid of it. The dog is a tool. I mean, most dogs are tools. But this one, along with Fable 2's innovative breadcrumb trail, forms a major part of this game's sophisticated, diegetic approach to getting rid of the dreaded minimap.
Sometimes when you're a designer, you have to push.
Molyneux hated minimaps, and this was part of his grand vision to do away with them for Fable 2. An on-screen breadcrumb trail that's easy to ignore until you need it, acting like an astronaut's tether back to the USS Active Quest so you don't ever feel anxious about straying away from it. And an on-screen companion pointing out places of interest. Treasure chests, dig spots, audible cues when there's danger nearby. One thing keeps you on the straight and narrow if you want to concentrate on the main quest. The other thing is constantly pulling you in the other direction. Hey, let's go over here, let's go over there, let's go and look at this. It was about keeping you looking at the world and its wonders, rather than staring at the sat-nav in the corner of the screen and ticking off objectives. And people loved it, as evidenced by the fact that Fable 2's first piece of DLC completely undermines the power of the ending by allowing you to resurrect your dog by dabbling in a little bit of consequence-free human sacrifice. So much for the morality system. And this was put in because of the burgeoning amount of hate mail received by Lionhead from the terminally upset.
Sending me personally an email that said that I deserved to die and he would never, ever, ever buy another game ever again unless I release a patch to resurrect his dog.
The dog is a bold and brilliant piece of game design, but it comes at a huge cost. Lionhead talked often about the sheer amount of processing power required to run the dog's AI. We know that the development team tore their hair out getting it to work properly, going through multiple iterations of the thing before landing on one that sort of worked most of the time. Who knows how many of Fable 2's many lost features could have been kept had the dog not been a puzzle that Molyneux would insist on the team solving. It's a question worth asking as we consider that Playground's Fable, like the original game, will not have a dog, and its absence reflects a project absent of the man himself. And it's tempting to wonder if Fable really is Fable without that conflict, without that messy, fizzing energy of the series' original creators, Dean and Simon Carter, who should not be forgotten in this story, trying to make their dream RPG while Molyneux repeatedly tears through their work like the Tasmanian devil, gets all the credit for it in the press, and generally prances around like an impish god of mischief, taking a big on the best laid plans of two very tired men.
But I feel like celebrating. I don't.
What we know about Lionhead's inside story, as revealed in the Eurogamer article Lionhead the Inside Story, seems a world away from the approach taken at Playground Games. The early decision to cut the dog from this rebooted modern take on Fable might seem like a bad decision that sort of misses the point of Fable, but I don't think it is at all. I think it demonstrates a rare commitment to making tough calls for the good of the wider project rather than pursuing prestige or vanity features at the cost of everything else. Both approaches represent risk, and it's important to recognise that great art is often messy and grueling in its creation, but it's equally important to recognise that it doesn't have to be that way. New Fable looks brilliant, and I love the direction they're taking it in. The complex new morality system, for example, feels like a worthy modernisation of one of the series' tropes, one that reflects the modern fragmented world that the new game will be released in. Not a black and white choice between good and evil, but a PR metagame of risk versus reward, where you can't please everyone but still need to exist in a world where people think you're a tosser.
Imbecile.
This is a new kind of Fable with a clear vision, a clear direction. The series has always been largely vibes-based, and the vibes so far seem very on point, spearheaded by a team who understand that Fable is Pratchett-esque, not Python-esque. Via the era of Mock the Week and Gavin and Stacey, a sort of milquetoast version of the Discworld. Less about the satirical bite, but as much as it's about being a warm blanket of knowing fantasy tropes to curl up in. A love letter to the same English folklore that inspired Tolkien to imagine the Shire, but where that idyllic land is torn asunder as Lord of the Rings mirrors the horrors of the First World War and its hyper-industrialised violence that terrified the generation of men that Tolkien belongs to. Albion's dark turns reflect the anxieties of post-war generations as neatly summarised by the Stranglers, that there are in fact no more heroes. A new Fable focusing on a landscape of grey morality where you're encouraged to, say, fund your adventures with a wide property portfolio while half the populace thinks all landlords are wankers is just what a wonderful sequel to the landlordism of Fable 2. What a perfect evolution of the series, much more so than an ever more intelligent dog could ever be.
It's like a fan club, but we hate you.
All the best stories echo the time they're written in, and we happen to live in a time where any kind of moral or political consensus is a thing of the dim and distant past. And it just so happens that as we now finally get to see what a post-Molyneux Fable is like this year, we also get to see the maximum Molyneux equivalent in the cheekily titled Masters of Albion, a game that looks so utterly lacking in any sort of coherent or consistent vision that it feels like the perfect swan song for gaming's very own mad wizard in a locked tower. It'll probably be full of incredible ideas that'll coalesce into a bit of a wonky greatest hits package that doesn't quite come together, but they've been savvy enough to put a dog in the trailer, so it will have that over New Fable, whatever happens. There will be people pitching op-eds at this very moment about how the New Fable loses something vital without the man, but I personally think the best place for Molyneux's particular brand of flawed genius is as far away from other creatives as possible. Playground Games are a very different outfit to Lionhead, particularly because its workplace culture doesn't involve the self-sabotaging threat of having a Flavor Flav of feature creep as its boss and ambassador, but their willingness to cut such a well-loved feature of the old games demonstrates a capacity for a different kind of risk-taking, one that serves the project rather than pandering to egos, one that serves the audience rather than trying to patronise us. So when I say that Fable is in safe hands, I don't mean in that boring, derogatory sort of Lib Dem sense. I mean it sincerely.
Oh,
I mean, it's being made for and by millennials, right? So I think the funniest thing this new game could do is replace the dog with a cat that does f*** all. I don't know how to end these things.